Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to In the Zone. This is Rich Sutter, Pete Coles, MV Pete Coles. We've survived another Valentine's Day, gentlemen. Made it through. And I just wanted to, before we get into any basketball, I wanted to make special mention of the Westfield Vocational High School culinary staff. Pete invited me down earlier today for a brunch that was absolutely, Valentine's Day brunch that was absolutely out of this world. The food was prepared exquisitely. Everything I put in my mouth was tremendous, and that's one of the best meals I've had in a really long time. So hats off to the young people back in the kitchen there doing an unbelievable job. Really, really, I was impressed, very impressed with the entire operation today. So let's just jump right into Feed 'em Fish, Pete. And we've got the NBA is on full throttle. Right now in February, we're about ready to go into the All-Star break, which is everybody's favorite weekend. We love to get into the All-Star game. A little tough to watch the All-Star game for me lately in the last bunch of years because it's purely become almost entertainment. But every once in a while, we'll throw it on there and see. But in the means, we have all the great college basketball going on and so much great stuff happening around. When we tell you that it's February 15th and the season is really coming to a rapid conclusion, we are absolutely on point there, and we are looking at having a maybe 6-7 game window left for NCAA teams, and that's going to be a really, really significant and vital 6 or 7 games because you're going to watch now as conference tournaments start, as seeds for those tournaments will now start to accumulate, and teams will now go into that tournament looking to amass a couple of extra wins so that they can get their seeds, so that they can actually get into the tournament. You're going to see a lot of prognostication about who's in and who's out, and we'll be bringing a lot of that to you from In the Zone as well. So much happens around this because it's a little bit difficult to tell you exactly who would be in a tournament scenario until you get to the tournaments, which are the automatic qualifying deciders. And so once you get there, that's going to define everything. Because as we've talked about before, let's just take the Atlantic 10, for example. Let's say that Richmond sneaks in, grabs the Atlantic 10 tournament. Does Dayton then get an at-large bid from the Atlantic 10,
Yeah,
which
sure.
would give them 2? If Dayton wins, it's probably not within the realm, significantly anyway, that Richmond would get that bid or any other team within the A10 would get that bid. So then if Dayton does win the tournament, now you're looking at having a one-bid league there. And so that will define what happens there, though, is it's kind of butterfly flapping his wings because what happens is let's say Dayton doesn't win, but Richmond does, and then Dayton gets selected as an at-large team. That's going to knock somebody else out. You only have a
Yeah.
finite amount of teams, so that's going to bounce somebody else out. That's why it's very fluid, and the committee that puts this together has a very, very large task in front of them. And before we even get into this, every year you see some teams that get skunked. Every year you see some teams that people shake their head and go, oh my God, how come they didn't get in? Now we're looking at having some all-star selections. Trae Young wasn't selected as an all-star. It's showing you the depth and the parity within the game of basketball right now is that there's so many really good players, so much really good stuff going on that it's so difficult to stand out and really be a significant player in this basketball world because it's flooded right now. It's absolutely flooded with great players and great talent. So in the NBA vein, the Lakers unveiled the first of 3 Kobe Bryant statues. I saw the first one that they put out. It's fitting. Kobe Bryant was a great player. He was a great Laker. It's very fitting. I don't know about 3 statues, but they put the first one out, and I thought they did a great job with it. It certainly statues can be a little difficult, especially for me. I don't know that they always get it right. I think with this one, they did a very good job. Really, really good job. So a little bit of sad news on the NBA front as well. I was an assistant coach at Colgate University, and for the first time in school history, we were representative of in the NCAA tournament. Colgate University, first time ever. And what happens is when you get selected, it's actually a very, very fun process. And our process was we went downtown Hamilton and we rented a bar. And we went into the bar and we just sat there and waited for the television to come on and tell us who our next opponent was going to be in the tournament. So it's the first time ever for the school. You're sitting in the bar with a slice of pizza and having a cold beer, and all of a sudden you know you're going to have to prepare a scouting report for this team when it comes up. And all of a sudden Kansas pops up, and we find out that we drew the Kansas Jayhawks in the first round. And so that's the way it unveils. You don't get any forewarning. You really don't know. You just sit there in front of the TV. You see this all the time, and you watch it. In that game, when we got to play Kansas, Kansas had several great players. The head coach at Stanford right now, Jared Haas, was on that team. The head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, Jacques Vaughn, was on that team. They had Scott Pollard, Rafe LaFrentz. It was, I mean, I've been watching college basketball for a long time. Roy Williams was the coach. They had a really, really, really good team. And I was saddened to see the other day that Scott Pollard, one of the big men on that team, I think he was drafted by the Celtics, but did play for the Celtics for a while. I know that. He was in need of a heart transplant. And I was saddened to hear that because he was such a great competitor, a great player. And when we prepared the scouting report for them, it was, Rafe LaFrentz, Ostertag, Pollard, and we were like, oh my God, we're not going to be able to stop all of that, And it was just a really, really good team. So I was interested, to see that and saddened to see it at the same time as well. In the NBA vein, one of the great things that keeps going right now in the NBA is this constant GOAT conversation.
Yeah.
It has a life of its own almost. And the GOAT conversation, it's fun. And you can come packed with facts and it's a great conversation. As I alluded to in previous shows, it's a little bit difficult of a conversation to have with people who didn't see Oscar Robertson, who didn't see Michael Jordan. They're LeBron age, students of the game. And that's because they're young and they haven't had that breadth of experience. So I think it would be difficult to say, if you hadn't seen both of them play, I think it's difficult to make that prognostication. But in this GOAT conversation, a lot of times it's Michael and LeBron. A lot of times Kobe Bryant will slide in there. But I think what you see is that it's more slanted or tilted toward players that have recently been seen. Whereas Wilt Chamberlain isn't generally on anybody's list of the greatest players in the game of basketball, and he would have to be. He would have to be. Bill Russell's accomplishments in the game of basketball are very much underrated and would have to be given consideration. John Havlicek, Jerry West, we're going way, way back, but these players don't get the consideration that a lot of these young players do.
But I think the other part of that conversation is NBA wasn't as popular as a sport in the national consciousness at the time either, as it is now.
It hadn't blown up.
Yeah.
Now, whether it was more important to the subset of people that really, really enjoyed it than it is now, I think we could maybe have an argument about that. But I agree with you there. But let's get into some of the numbers. LeBron and Michael Jordan. Okay? Total points, LeBron is ranked first. Michael Jordan is ranked fifth. In points per game, LeBron is ranked fifth. Michael Jordan is first. Playoff points per game, LeBron is sixth. Michael Jordan first. Scoring titles, LeBron sixth. Michael Jordan first. Finals MVP, LeBron second ranked. Michael Jordan ranked first. All defensive first team, LeBron is ranked fifth. Michael Jordan ranked first. Player efficiency, LeBron is ranked third. Michael Jordan ranked first. The only category in all of those categories in which LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan is in the points total. And that's because I think, there's been a disparity in the amount of games that either one of them's played. Okay. Celtics had a nice little moment the other night, we'll call it, where they became one of only three teams in NBA history that has eclipsed the mark of defeating an opponent by 50 points in multiple games in a season. There's a lot to chew on there. Basically, they throttled the Nets the other night, the Brooklyn Nets, to the tune of exactly 50, 136 to 86.
Wow.
They hammered them. And that's the second team this year. The Indiana Pacers were the other team that the Celtics did it to. It's a rare accomplishment. Only 3 other teams have done that, so that makes it, something really, really significant. Only 2 other teams have done it, 3 total now. The other 2 teams were the 92-93 Kings and the 78-79 Milwaukee Bucks, which was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson, a great team, wound up going all the way to the finals and winning it all that year, I believe. Joe Mazzulla, Celtics coach, in that win with Brooklyn, also got his 100th career victory. So congratulations to Coach Mazzulla as well. All right, so we're going to skip right into NCAA Fish, and we've got some soap opera news to jump off with, Pete.
Okay.
The young and winless. I don't know how they're going to do it now that there's only one. Detroit Mercy knocked off IUPUI the other night to get their first victory. They have a win. Let the world know Mercy, Mercy Me has ended in Detroit. They are now 1 win, and they're on a hot streak. Mississippi Valley State still remains winless, and we'll keep an eye on that. But as we alluded to, tick-tock, there goes the clock. Your chances are dwindling. And I looked at Mississippi Valley State remaining schedule, but also their MOD right now, which is their margin of defeat, and the MOD isn't good. Their margin of defeat isn't great. This was a good win for Detroit Mercy, 81-66, and they're closing the season on a high note. All right, so 0-24 and 1-26. Ohio State, in the middle of the season, we talked about this with the carousel. Go back, rewind the tape. We said when your AD gives you a vote of confidence in the middle of the season, that's when you're in most peril. So the AD at Ohio State came out and said, Holtzman's our guy. We love him. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we have full vote of confidence in him. And then in the middle of the season, and I get into this, we got into this with Stubblefield at DePaul. We're going to get into it again today. There's absolutely zero reason for you to fire your coach in the middle of the season. Especially Ohio State wasn't doing great, but they're somewhere above 500 in their total record, and they're in the bottom of the Big Ten right now, but the Big Ten is a very tough league, and they've fallen off a little bit. With all of the NIL and all of the portal stuff going on, it's been a little bit tough to find your program integrity these days. But Holtzman he'd done pretty good there, but here's the soft landing. Okay, 4 years left on the contract, $12.8 million on the buyout. So as much as they'll be weeping for Holtzman out in Columbus, Ohio, the $12.8 million is going to make it a whole lot easier to land.
Sure.
He was 137 and 86 in his time there, which you look at that and say, wow, that's really pretty good. That ain't bad.
Yeah.
That's a lot of cannolis, Pete. That's a lot of cannolis. 67 and 65 in the Big Ten. And the last 2 years have been terrible. So we thought he was in trouble ourselves. But again, middle of the season, to do that to the team, basically what you're saying is we don't want them to do good. Because if somehow he gets this team together, goes into the Big Ten tournament, and wins the tournament and goes to the NCAA, it's going to be really difficult for you to fire him under those circumstances.
Sure, yeah.
So they're doing it now to preempt anything that could go good, which is a terrible way to treat your student athletes.
Somebody just
personally.
launched a torpedo into the season.
Yeah, exactly. You just said, fellas, it's over. Basically what you've done. You threw a Molotov cocktail into the locker room and said, fellas, we're going to take them now, as opposed to 3 weeks from now. I just don't understand it. I really don't understand it. Michigan AD offers support for Juwan Howard. Same type thing. Juwan Howard is 8-17 right now. by all stretches, has had a little bit of difficulty at Michigan, a lot of different types of ways. And so when the AD comes out and says, well, we have full support, that's when you start looking over your shoulder if you're a basketball coach.
Well, the fact that they have to say it in the middle of a season and say we have your support or you have our support means that there are people questioning it, or the rumors are flying around that they're questioning his competence.
They have chat boards now, where anybody can go in and talk and anybody can go in and say whatever they want, and so believe it or not, though, a lot of people are listening to that stuff these days, and when they find out that it's an avalanche in there, then, and especially at these places where, let's say, you have two guys who are your NIL guys, and those guys are spending a lot of money, and they're looking at their return of investment right now and saying, we're at the bottom of the Big Ten. We're not doing well. Our program has hit lows that it hasn't been at a long time. Those two gentlemen are the ones making the call on the coach right now. Whoever's paying the NIL money, whoever's coffers or whoever's lighting up the coffers, that's who's making the call on these coaches right now. So the AD at Ohio State might have sat there and said, we have full confidence in him. 100%, we're behind him. They didn't say they were 100 yards behind him. And the first time one of those two boosters calls up and says, I think we need to make a change, that's exactly when it comes. And I don't know why. Again, I'm going to say this, and I'll be critical of it, unless it's something very egregious. You don't make that change in the middle of the year. You don't make the change because you're losing. At DePaul, did you think Stubblefield was going to turn it around this year? What were the indicators for that? There were zero indicators they would go anywhere but where they have been for the last number of years, which is DFL in the Big East. But by going and saying, okay, we're going to give him one more year, you had the opportunity to change in the mid of last year if you wanted to make a change. But they said, no, we'll do it one more time. It also allows them off the hook so their buyout isn't as large. Right? Cut down some of the years on that contract. You shorten up your buyout. Yeah. But at the same time, now you go and say, in the middle of the season, we got to get rid of him. That's on you. You should have either done it before the season started or had the temerity and followed an obligation you had to those student athletes and said, we'll wait till the end of the year. It doesn't have a lot of value to do it in the middle of the year. Are you forming a search committee right now? Are you hiring a contractor who's now going to jump in and start to do the work right now? You cannot talk to any of the coaches who are currently in season.
Right.
Nobody's going to want to let you talk to their coach when you're in the middle of the season. So you're going to have to wait anyway. And so that's why I don't get it. But Holtzman, they went ahead and did it, and they bounced him. And I don't know, that's one of those carousel jobs that's a big job. If Michigan opens, Ohio State opens, that's two right off the get that could create 3 to 4 more vacancies at the very same time. If they start to hit the lower levels, Dusty May jumps up and takes the Michigan job. Then Florida Atlantic is open. Langle from Colgate jumps in and takes the Florida Atlantic job. Yeah. Now Colgate is open. The coach from New Hampshire jumps in and says, I want to go to Colgate. Now New Hampshire's open. So you've had 4 or 5 jobs that will open just as a result of that one big job. Has to kind of be a big job to create that much domino. But generally, you can get a good 2 or 3 out of almost any job as long as they don't go retread. As long as they don't go back to retread, which means the guy hasn't been in the business for a long time. He's been sitting around doing nothing, and he jumps back in for another shot. Probably got fired before, probably got sent somewhere else. They'll have some of those guys sitting around, and we'll talk about that as we go. But the young and winless ended for at least one end of that. Texas Tech went into Kansas the other night. Bill Self, the reason we're going to bring this is he's a multiple coaches being ejected from games now. First time in Bill Self's career, first time in coach at Baylor, Drew's career. They're getting ejected from games because of what they're seeing on the sidelines. And so Kansas got beat by Texas Tech 79-50. Okay, that's one of the best victories for Texas Tech in a really long time. We've talked about how we like this team, But it also goes to speak of the absolute depth of the Big 12, where you can get hit anywhere at any time, and any of these teams come in. Kansas, that's one of the largest margins of victory that you'll see in a really, really long time. Okay, the ACC is going to stay in North Carolina for the foreseeable future. They're going to go from 25 through 28, 29, and they've also legalized gambling at that time. So there'll be lots of fun down in that Carolina area for the ACC tournament. It'll certainly add a little bit of glow to it. But here's what we're talking about when we mention catfish, okay? Conference catfish. Northwestern is a conference catfish. Now, this year, they have to be doing a little bit better with their basketball team, but generally their sports sit at the bottom of the Big Ten, and they catfish the money that comes in from all the other teams who get bids. Now, they might get a bid this year, so they'll be contributing a little bit this year, but in most years, they're catfish. Okay? Here's why you're a catfish. Okay? It pays. It pays to be a catfish. Okay? The SEC schools is one of the biggest conferences in the country. They will get $51.3 million to split from the 22-23 season. Boom. Right on time, Pete. They were second. Now that's $51.3 million per school.
Oh.
You're talking about $741 million divided by 14 schools. Wow. So it's $53 million, which is a $19.2 million increase over the previous year. Now you know why they're doing it. Now you know why they're doing anything to get what they got to get. They're doing anything to get the players they got to get, to get the TV contracts they got to get. They'll do just about anything right now. The Big Ten is 58.4 per team. Big Ten. Now there's less teams there also, so there's less of a slice to the pie. Your pizza in the Big 12 has, 14 slices now, 15 slices.
Getting a New York slice.
You're gonna get it right down the line here, and then so you're looking at the Big Ten, and they're having a good time with it. Kentucky has lost 3 straight games. Wisconsin's lost 4 straight games. It's a little bit upsetting to watch what's happening with Kentucky. They just don't defend well, and they need to hire somebody that can teach defense, because their defense is not good. That's why they're vulnerable every time they go out. But they just don't defend well. And Wisconsin had been flying very, very high, a little bit like Purdue. I liken them as a program because they have no business being in the top 10 in basketball. They have no business being in the top 10 in basketball. The guy Gard has done a great job. Greg Gard's done a great job. They're in rarefied air as a program. But every once in a while, that balloon gets popped, and then they come down, and it's just like a balloon that gets popped, has that really, really weird fall to the ground. So right now, they're in that fall, and you got to see if they can get it back. What happens in these conferences is there's very little chance. Where are you going to get it back? Where are you going to get it back in the Big Ten? You go to Maryland, they can beat you. You're going to go to Penn State, maybe you get a little bit of help there, but there's not a lot of places to hide in these conferences, and you're seeing that right now. Okay, Pete, we're going to bang out. We go, as promised, we had our Super 15, NBA Power 15. We've got that all set to go, and we have the graphic to go with it. But we also have our Super 25 in there as well for the NCAA. I finally got all the information to Pete at the right time. But take a look at that beautiful graphic right there, folks. And we've had some movement in our 15 here. So let me just get a little bit of this ginger ale. All right. It's a little bit tough after a game on Wednesday to do this on Thursday.
Sorry about that.
The throat doesn't always hold up sometimes, but the ginger ale certainly does help. So we're back and happy to report that you have the Boston Celtics still holding on to that number 1 spot. Pete, how long's it been for them?
Almost since the beginning, right? There's maybe a week or two that they've been out of the top spot.
Really almost the whole time we've been doing this. They've been the number 1 team. They're 43-12. That's really, really good really, really good percentages, really good number. They have a really good team. I would say right now it's not inconceivable you would see them and the Clippers as the two teams that are going back and forth right now that would make it all the way through the finals. I think the Celtics have the right combination this year and the right depth, then a little bit better than they did last year. Also, what happens also is they got outcoached last year, and we're going to have to see how that goes in another series. When Spoelstra got a hold of them, the Miami Heat got a hold of them, they just, they outplayed them a little bit, but they also had the right moves at the right time. So we're going to have to see how that unfolds as well. Minnesota Timberwolves, they're hanging around the top here all year long. They've bounced down a little bit, up and down, but they're really solid. And for them to have come up as the number one team in the West, that's exciting because they have some great young talent on that team. 38-16 is I'm sure anybody in Minnesota would have signed up for that right away. OKC Thunder pulling in at number 3. We like this team. They're young. They got a lot of heart. They play good when they're on the road. They play good at home. I like this team a lot. 37-17. That's a good record for them. And to be listed third of all the teams in the NBA right now, I don't think anybody would have prognosticated that in the beginning of the year. All right, so we go to 4, the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're really doing good stuff. 36-17. They're right behind the Celtics as the number 2 team. This is something that folks have to take notice of. And I don't want to really hang it all on him, but since they fired Adrian Griffin in Milwaukee and brought in Doc Rivers, look at what's happened to this team. They're in free fall right now. They're not winning games. They're not doing anything that's really, really significant here. And you just shake your head sometimes, about some of these moves that they make. But the Cleveland Cavaliers are in the 4th spot. The Clippers are probably, I think, maybe the best team in the West. If they had to play the Timberwolves, I think the Clippers might win that series. Timberwolves are very tough. They have some tough matchups, the Timberwolves, just like Jimmy Butler was a tough matchup for people last year. They have some tough matchups on that team as well. When you have a 7-footer who can shoot the 3-ball like they do, that can be a problem spacing-wise. So we got the Denver Nuggets in the 6th spot. No surprise there. They're a solid team, but I think, coming off a championship last year, pretty much the full force of their team right here, I think people would expect them to be a little bit higher. Give it time. All-Star break is the halfway point in the NBA world, so give that a little bit of time. Here's the Bucks in the 7th spot. I think we had them in a 2 spot when Rivers was hired. I think they were our number 2 team in all of it when Rivers got hired, maybe 3. Now, within like 2 weeks, they're down, and they've lost a lot of games, to teams that they really, really you wouldn't consider them, to be games that they should be losing.
So here's the thing, though. We say so often that coaching doesn't really matter in the NBA, but then you hire a coach and the team starts to tank. Does coaching mean more than you think in the NBA, or is it just a game manager, window dressing, play with the egos?
I think so much of it comes down to what you and I talk about all the time. It's chemistry.
Yeah.
You can't change your players in midseason, can't change your coaches in midseason, in the middle of everything that was going on, and not have some of the players in that locker room shaking their head.
Okay. You
just can't do it. So I think it's a lot of chemistry. I think in the resume world, Doc Rivers, Adrian Griffin, that's a huge mismatch. Doc Rivers has coached at really high level for a really long time in a really lot of big series. Adrian Griffin doesn't have that resume. So if you're looking at resumes, yeah, but right now you're looking at them in free fall as well. Right. And I think some of that comes down to what you and I allude to all the time with the chemistry. It's just not that easy to drop an Alka-Seltzer into the water, watch it go fizz, fizz, and think that it's not going to cloud up the water.
Yep.
I just think that it's firing a coach in the middle of the season. College is terrible to do. I understand it a little bit more in the pros, but name me the guy, okay? Name me the person that took over an NBA franchise in the middle of the year and absolutely turned that thing around. I don't know him.
You can wait for a long time for that one.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it might have happened somewhere, but it's not the norm. And when you're talking about the Milwaukee Bucks, who have a chance to be the number one team in the whole Eastern Conference, you shake your head a little bit.
Yep.
Shake your head a little bit. The New York Knicks, my hometown New York Knicks, hanging in tough. They've had some injuries, but I think they're doing good. I love Jalen Brunson. I love the game that the enthusiasm he brings and the game that he has. I really like that guard play that they're using out there at the Knicks, playing a little bit of defense. 33 and 22 is a pretty good record for them. They're really ensconced in the playoff picture, going to have a good record, and I think they're going to make a good run down the stretch here. Wouldn't surprise me to see if the Knicks were in the Final Four of the Eastern Conference this year. That would not surprise me. New Orleans Pelicans, hanging tough. They're hanging tough. They're bouncing around, too. Like, you keep waiting for some of these other teams, like the Pacers, some of the other teams to make that move and get going, and they really, they haven't done a whole lot of that. The Pelicans really have been a team just lately that have really shown a good surge and are holding on to what they got and improving their lot a little bit. We have them in the 9th spot. I'd say we probably had them somewhere down in 13, 12 range not too long ago. And this hasn't been an easy pot to rise in. There hasn't been an easy way to get up. So I think that's pretty good for the Pelicans. The Suns probably have risen the fastest of any team in our Power 15 just recently. They were on the precipice of not being in. They were on the edge there a little bit, and now have solided up into the number 10 spot. Kevin Durant is having a great season, and they're playing well. I just don't think that they have the same firepower. And it's kind of weird to talk about the Phoenix Suns with Beal and Booker and Durant and some of these other great players they have, and to say that they don't have the same firepower that the Clippers have. But right now, if both of those teams are healthy, I think the Clippers have more talent right now. So this is what happens when your best player gets hurt in the NBA. You got a star. You're riding him. You're going to him. You're going all day. You're riding Joel Embiid. And now all of a sudden he goes down. He's going to be out for multiple games, and this is what happens to your team. They're in full free fall right now in Philadelphia. 76ers are reasonable 32 and 22, but right now they're struggling because their best player's out. When he comes back, how quickly will the knee adjust, and how quickly does he get back to game speed, game shape? That's really important, because when you sit out all this time, you can ride the bike all you want, but you're not going to get those basketball reps in. And so that makes it difficult. So as much as they'll say he'll probably be out a month, I think you need to probably look beyond 6 weeks before you see him start to feel his own self again. So you'll have to keep an eye on that. And right now, 6 weeks in the NBA season is a long time. It's a lifetime. Luka and the Mavericks playing very well. Kyrie Irving playing very well. The Mavericks are 32 and 23. Pretty good spot. They've been bouncing around the bottom of our 15 all along. 12's about as high as we've had them, though, so they're showing a little bit of elevation. But this team really has to buckle down and take off, because the West is there to be won. The West is capable. You don't have the Golden State Warriors as good as they have been. You don't have some of the other teams, the Lakers, as good as they have been. So the West is open and can be taken. So I think that's what I'm looking for from the Mavericks, especially with two great players like they have right there. 13, 14, and 15, you got the Sacramento Kings. Great season for them. They had been a little higher, starting to go back and forth, but that's going to happen. They're a pretty young team. Indiana Pacers, they have Tyrese Haliburton back after a very bad injury, and they also now have Pascal Siakam, who had a very, very solid game in his return to Toronto. Well received there by the Toronto crowd, very classily received. But they're 31 and 25. We're going to see now if the Haliburton-Siakam package can work, because that's two very dynamic players. Can they start to rise, though? They've been 15, 14. They're right around that knot. Can they get into the 7 or 8 spot, which is where you want to be, because that means you're in the top 4 in your conference. And so we'll see if the Pacers can get there. 15, Orlando Magic. I had the Magic and the Heat tied. I think the Magic are playing a little bit better right now. The Heat are starting to show some signs and play some good stuff. But For NBA executives, they can take a little bit of a breather right now because although we don't have them in our top 15, Golden State Warriors and the Lakers, if the season ended today, would both make the playoffs. That's been on a considerable effort on everybody's part to make sure that the Lakers get in there. Considerable effort to make sure that the Golden State Warriors are part of the playoffs as well. That's part of the NBA package business model. It's part of the NBA business model. You know, that certain teams in the big market arenas, in the big market areas, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, those teams have to participate. And you have all of they want all of the California teams in that they can get. I can assure you that. The Celtics are right now about the hottest team in the NBA. They've won 6 in a row. Dallas has won 6 in a row. Golden State has won 5, and the Lakers have won 3 in a row. So pretty good there with the Power 15 there. I love the graphic. And now we're going to move on to the Super 25 of the NCAA. And we're right on target here with this show. We're moving and grooving and flying right through it. So we're going to get into this right now. We made a statement a couple of weeks ago that we did not think UConn would be challenged for our number 1 until after Valentine's Day. And that prediction has held. That prediction has held true. UConn coming in at number 1, doing very, very good stuff on both sides of the basketball. That's why I have them as the number 1 team in the country, because they're very good on defense. They're also very, very solid on offense. They can hurt you in a lot of ways, just like last year's team can. This year's team, I'm going to go out and say it right now, is better offensively than last year's team. This year's UConn team is better offensively than last year's team. Caravan is playing at a very high level. Klingen's better than he was last year. They're the wings that they brought in, Cam Spencer from Rutgers. They just Stephen Castle. They have a couple of more guys that are going to be NBA players right here. So UConn has got it going on. Coach Hurley really, really has this team smoking it and really, really doing well. So to me, if you have to pick between them, Purdue, and Houston, and that's a pretty tough pick between them, especially between UConn and Purdue. I think I'm going to go with UConn just because they're both sides of the ball heavy. They can do it on both sides of the ball. I don't see that defensive effort all the time from Purdue, although with the big fella Zach Edey inside, they can really, really punch you out and really, really dominate inside there. But I have Purdue in the second spot, 22-2. You're coming through a season right now. You have 24 games. You've only lost 2 of them. That's an unbelievably great season. Matt Painter and the Purdue staff have done things that nobody there has done in a really long time. Bring in Zach Edey back for another year, I think has, to me, really solid him up as a lottery pick in the lottery NBA draft. I know a lot of people, well, let's not say a lot of people, no one has him as a lottery pick right now. No one. I'm going to put all of my NBA executive friends out there on notice right now. He's absolutely a lottery pick. Absolutely. Zach Edey is a lottery pick.
Yeah.
Houston, 21-3. They play the best defense in the country. Any coaches out there, and I know we're all struggling to get anybody into a defensive stance these days, Kelvin Sampson has his team playing defense like you're supposed to play defense. They have intensity. Jamal Sheed might be the best defensive player in the entire country. He's tough. He reminds me of Marcus Smart, who played for the Celtics for those years. But I think Houston, I've said it and I'll keep saying it, they have some deficiencies on the offensive side of the ball that I think could catch them in the NCAA tournament, which we always say is about making shots. NCAA tournament for years and years, yeah, you can play all the great defense you want, and then there's those great shots that go in that people really remember. In the 4th spot, we put Arizona. Arizona's been out west holding on. They had some really, really head-scratching losses there for a while. Florida Atlantic beat them. Some other teams beat them as well. But at 19-5, they're holding in there. They're representative of the West Coast. And if you had to pick all 4 of those teams right now as 1, 2, 3, and 4 as your 4 seeds to be number 1, you'd be getting good conference representation. You'd have pretty good geographical representation. And I think that's a pretty good solid 4 right there if you're going to have them as number 1. It would exclude the ACC from being a number one seed, which usually doesn't happen. They usually have one of their teams in there. But right now, they're eating themselves down in ACC land. Number 5, Auburn. They got blitzed at Florida. That Florida team's pretty good, too. I expect that they'll make the NCAA tournament. But that Florida team, when they're on their home floor, is very, very good and very solid. And Auburn, a lot like where you have the Duke, North Carolina hangover, when Auburn plays Alabama, that can also create a hangover. And so Auburn happened to beat Alabama in that payback game and then happened to go to Florida and have some trouble with Florida there. So that league is really tough. The SEC is brutal. And it's going to be really, really a great SEC tournament this year to see who comes out of there as champion. In the 6th spot, Iowa State. I like this team. They've had a couple of knickknacks, losses just recently, but so has everybody. And this team plays great defense. They get after it, and they really, really can shoot the ball pretty good when they get going. They're a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball than Houston is. Doesn't defend it as well as Houston, but they've been toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the country, and they've been able to hold water. So I like Iowa State. Marquette, they have the best point guard in the country, Tyler Kolek. Hands down to me. He's been the best point guard this year. And I love their big man, Oso. I would put him right up there on our NBA draft board. The NBA draft board that you're looking at this year, just to take a quick segue, if you're looking at all the available big men that are out there right now in the NCAA, and we can name a few of them, just knock off a few of them real quick for you. You would say Zach Edey of Purdue, Kyle Filipowski of Duke, Donovan Clingan of UConn, and then throw in a couple of these other players here that are in the mix. But Oso of Marquette, the young freshman, is also going to be, if he comes out, I would say he'd probably be getting consideration as a lottery pick or somewhere in that, at least in the top 20, because the young man just oozes potential and talent. Number 8, we have Duke. Although they got caught at North Carolina, they didn't get the North Carolina hangover that North Carolina got. They got beat at North Carolina, but then they shaped up, got their stuff back together, and they're 19-5 right now. I don't know if that team can win the ACC tournament, but right now, I don't know who could. I don't know that North Carolina's been consistent enough to win it. I don't think Duke has all the right pieces to win it. Virginia has been good at times, but also struggles at times. Miami is in free fall. Syracuse, some of the other middle-of-the-pack teams there, Wake Forest, NC State are doing okay, but they're also getting clipped and in free fall. How many of those teams from the ACC go? I saw somebody say 4, somebody say 5. They're only going to get 4 teams in. I think at the end of the day, the ACC will get 7 easy.
Wow.
I really think they will. Tennessee coming in. This team's just holding on. They're just holding on. 17-6. They got clipped early on with some losses. They're in a conference where you can lose to anybody on any given night. Any given Sunday, as they used to say, you can lose to anybody in that conference, and Tennessee has proven that. They got clipped up the other night and really, really looked bad doing it. It's like some of these losses that you look at with the MOD, the margin of defeat. Some of these teams are just absolutely laying down and not playing good basketball. They're absolutely quitting almost when you go in there and you say, okay, you're down by 30 at halftime. That's just kind of laying down, Illinois in the 10th spot, another knick-knack, paddywhack, give this dog a bone. With Shannon going out, they kind of hiccuped. And I think, now he's back, you get another hiccup. And so they're kind of holding on. I still think they're the best team in the Big Ten, although time will tell. They got clipped a couple of times, and right now they need to steady the ship and make a good run here at the end. North Carolina coming in the 11th spot. Ain't nothing finer than North Carolina, except when they're dumping games to Clemson. And so they're coming in at 19-6. And they got bombed at Syracuse the other night, too. They went to Syracuse. Red Autry has his team playing with enthusiasm, with heart, and a lot of determination, and they went in there and absolutely spanked North Carolina. So the loss to Clemson at home hurt, but then traveling up to the Carrier Dome and getting that kind of beating from a Syracuse team that hasn't really played very well, it makes me think that some of these conferences might be trying to get some of their middle-of-the-pack teams ready for the tournament with some of these W's that are coming their way. Baylor, 18-6. Another good defensive team. They're just undisciplined at times. I've watched them. They make crazy, crazy decisions at times. I watched the end of one of their games one time, and I could not tell you which team was actually trying to win the game. They were just both throwing it away with such ease and with such alacrity that it was just like, is anybody here trying to win this game?
Somebody playing hot potato?
It was just going back and forth, turn it over, bad shot, all the stuff. Like at the end of the game, you would think with all the level of coaching, all the technology, all the stuff they had, you should at least get better shots off than some of these guys are getting off. Last 2 or 3 minutes of the game. Downright comical now a little bit. It's downright comical. Okay, so you got BYU, 13, 18-6. I don't want to hold them in 13, but they're in the Big 12 now. And so they're playing everybody every single night, and they're holding on. But they were also like 12-0. Now they're 18-6, which means you're 6-6 in your last 12 games. You started off great. Colorado started off great. Oklahoma started off great. But now we're in complete free fall because there's no cannolis in your league.
Right.
You don't play anybody like that in your league, which also lends to the question, should you do that? Should you have such a soft schedule because it's hurting you? You should play up in your schedule a little bit because having a soft schedule like that, although you'll accumulate some of those wins, eventually it's going to come and get you later on. And that's what you're seeing right now. Some of these coaches do this all the time, and then you watch them enter into their league season, play sub 500. That's where I think the at-large bids could really use some tightening up. If you're sub 500 in your league, you don't get an at-large bid. If you're sub 500 and you ate 12 cannolis to get up to 20 wins, and then you sat there at 8-8 in your league, you shouldn't get an at-large bid.
Yep.
Some of these other schools should get them. I just personally feel that way. Kansas, 14, they got smoked. They got smoked, and it was one of the worst losses in their program history. And so you're seeing this with some of these teams because they just don't go to play hard, And that one might have been at Kansas. That one might have been at Kansas. I'd have to go back and check that. Texas Tech in the 15 spot. This team's pretty good. 18-6. They've gotten clipped a little bit here, a little bit there, but they have some really good quality wins too. They have some good quad 1 wins, and they're going to have some good quad 2 wins. So I see Texas Tech as a team that's going to be NCAA ready and somebody that could do a good job in the tournament because they play very hard on both sides of the basketball. I like that team. Virginia, put them in at 16, 19-6. They gave Miami a beating. They've handled their business a little bit here and there, but they're getting knick-knacked up as well. The ACC is handing out some beatings in some of these places, and no matter who you are, you're up there and ready to roll. You've got Mississippi at 18-6. Again, this is not a favorite of KenPom. We have them in at 17. KenPom has them in a 40 somewhere. That's a really, really stringent conference. You're 18-6. I know their non-conference schedule was not good, but neither was Houston's. Neither was a lot of teams that we're looking at right here. They didn't have the non-conference schedule as well. Now, Mississippi, 18-6. They were at one time 11-0, 12-0, something like that as well too. So they've really come back to the pack, and eventually they'll get bounced out, I think. New Mexico, 20-5. Really, really good Richard Pitino team. They got a little bit of bump up, got a little bit of slide there, but also we look at margin of defeat sometimes. Like we were very high on South Carolina, but then they got out and they got banged up twice, and Auburn beat them by like 30 the other night, by like 40. And to us, that matters a little bit, just as how your team's going and playing. All right, back to Gonzaga. They floated back in there, Pete, 18-6. We just don't think that they belong in the top 25, to be honest with you. But there was no way to keep them out. Now, the way everybody's free-falling, you have 19 rank here for a team with 6 losses. And that's like crazy. As I said to you last week, we could have a top 10 team here by the end of the year in the top 10 that has double-digit losses. It could happen. So Florida Atlantic in at 20. We really like this team. Got to see them live against my vaunted St. Bonaventure Bonnies, who had an unbelievable win at Fordham the other night. Way to go with Coach Schmidt and the Bonnies. But that Florida Atlantic team, when you watch a team that close and get to see the size of Vlad Golden and John Davis and some of the other players that they have, they're pretty good. You can see why they went to the Final Four last year. And again, Dusty May, you're going to hear his name a lot. You're going to hear his name a lot when the carousel starts to spin. I don't know if why would you go? If you look at Florida Atlantic home games right now, they're a mosh pit. They're sold out. They're doing unbelievably great stuff. Now, you live in Florida. You have a great quality of life there in Florida. It's warm. You don't have to worry about shoveling all the time and doing all this other stuff that, coaches like myself are out there the other day and we're shoveling, right before our game. So Florida Atlantic, you're in Boca. So do you want to take the Michigan job for a little extra money, but then, have all that pressure, have all that heat, and not have the same great fan base, not have all that good stuff that you have right now?
Give up your rock star status?
Right, for a little bit more money. And going into a job that right now, any of those Midwestern jobs are tough because they have, terrible winters out there. And so you're recruiting against Alabama, Florida, Georgia, where it gets nice and warm and it's really kind of pleasant down there in the wintertime. I think that's where you're seeing the shift going. A lot of the good players want to go to the SEC, the Big 12, and places like that because they're having that great climate. Syracuse for years lived off the Carrier Dome, but the climate up in Syracuse during the winter is terrible. You're going to get 200 inches of snow.
Yep.
You're in St. Bonaventure. You're going to get 200 inches of snow. That's why some of these other schools are really, really excelling, in their area because they just have a great climate as well too. And if you're in college, who doesn't want to be in Malibu? Who doesn't want to be at Pepperdine? Okay, so we got Utah State 21, another Ken Palm dislike. They don't like Utah State. I like them. I like the Mountain West. I see the Mountain West getting 5 or 6 teams into the NCAA tournament this year. They'll be one of the most heavily represented conference tournaments in the NCAA tournament. Take it for what I said right now. They'll get 5, they'll get 6, and people will be surprised when it happens, but I will not be. I will not be. Utah State 20-4. They're holding on. You played 24 games and only lost 4 of them. That's pretty good. San Diego State, another Mountain West, 19-6. They've had a couple of stumbles here and there lately, but that was a Final Four team from last year. Florida Atlantic is a Final Four team from last year. Both have significant components of that championship team still back. All right, so we're going here now with 23, 24, and 25. We got a new team coming in at 25. We have Alabama, 17-7. They're at the top of their conference, though, in the SEC conference. Some of their losses were non-conference losses that you would shake your head at and go, wow, you'd think Alabama might be able to win that game. But right now, they're in the top third of their conference. Probably that loss to Auburn hurt them a little bit, but they're right there at the top of the SEC. And they'll be, by the time it's all said and done, probably a top 3 or 4 seed, even with the 7 losses. Creighton, I like this team. Trey Alexander and everybody else. They got, Shearman and some great shooters out there. They got the big kid inside. I like this team, and I like their coaching staff a lot. Derek Kellogg, obviously, Western Mass product, but I really like Greg McDermott. I think he's one of the greatest minds in the offensive set for basketball today. So any young coaches, you're looking to steal some plays, go steal some Greg McDermott plays. You'll look like a genius. All right, St. Mary's. This is our new team. 20-6 out of Moraga, California. One of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Beautiful little setup there. Great little environment. And they got it going. They're doing pretty good. Here's a couple of algorithm head shakers, all right, that we talked about. We have Alabama in the 23 spot, and it was reluctantly. Ken Palm has them at number 6. Torvik hangs them around somewhere 6 or 7. I just don't get it. Michigan State, they have them at number 15. They're 16-9. They're not even in our top 25. Right now, I don't think Michigan State would get invited to Le Grand Ball as a Cinderella. I don't think they would get a shot right now. Wisconsin, they have them at number 18, 17-18. I see it, but I thought that was kind of, the way things have been going. 4 in a row, boom, boom, boom. You got to take notice of that. You got to take a little shot at that. And Texas at 25th, 16-8. Things aren't going well. They're at the bottom of their conference and not doing great. All right. So that wraps us up with our really, really good set of graphics right there. Really, really good set of information that we got going there. We wanted to talk a little bit this week. We got about 5 minutes left. And so we wanted
before we get into that,
go ahead.
have you heard this thing about the Steph Curry shot from downtown?
I see him all the time doing stuff, but go ahead and tell us what it's all about.
Check this out. That's from the ramp. Pre-game. Throws it all the way across the court.
Show it again. That's crazy.
All right, let me reset it. Check this out. Here we go.
That's ridiculous. That's well over 100 feet. 94 feet from a college basketball arena. All of these arenas are 94 feet. And I don't know, this guy's over here just shooting like normal, like you just see that. He's sitting there trying to keep shooting. But that's just
here's it from the other angle.
That's unbelievable.
That's just wrong.
This guy is going to be considered probably the greatest shooter in the game of basketball by the time it's all said and done.
Wow.
So what I wanted to finish with today was it's been a little bit interesting now because as the carousel starts to spin, the carousel has taken on to a little bit life of its own. But also to show you a little bit of how some of these coaches are selected and to talk about who probably is going to be talked about in this next cycle where I think it's going to be 45, 40 jobs this year. I don't think it's going to be that 60 number that we had a couple of years back. And I've alluded to some of the reasoning for that where, COVID slowed things down a little bit in that vein. And then it kind of all just got caught up in this perfect storm. And then you had 60. Adam Nelson is at Hoop Dirt. I think he projected for 65, last year and came almost right to the number. He was almost exactly right on the number, if not right on the number. So I'm forecasting for a little bit of different action this year, but you never know. As we talked about, you don't know what can happen with a retread jumping into a job. You don't know what happens with all these other places. So, like we said before, Dusty May is going to be somebody that really, really gets talked about a lot. And I used to tease Fordham University all the time because Fordham University is always looking for a basketball coach for the last 20 years. One of the programs that have fallen and can't get up. And every time they were looking for a coach, they would put Bobby Cremins' name on the front page of the Post. We're going to go get Bobby Cremins. That was their thing. Bringing Bobby back to the Bronx. Forever, they were going to go get Bobby Cremins. And then people would sit there in the know and go, you can't get Bobby Cremins. That might solve your issue with the New York Post for one day, but you're not going to get Bobby Cremins. And so when they say, okay, who's going to take the West Virginia job if it opens? And they'll throw out Kelvin Sampson, and they'll throw out the guy Drew at Baylor. They have better jobs than that right now. They're not taking that job. Bobby Cremins isn't taking the Fordham job. Dusty May. He might, because there probably is a significant difference because when you get to the upper echelon, you're going to be talking about like 4, 5, 6 million a year. That's walking away money. That's retirement money if you get one of those jobs for one shot. Like we're talking about this guy, Holtman, getting a $12.8 million. He doesn't have to work again for the rest of his life. And so whether he chooses to or not, we'll see. But that would be, he would be a retread now, because he's already been fired, So Dusty May is a name you're going to hear a lot about. Does he want to leave, though? And so that's what happens with these searches is that they start chasing the wrong guy that they can't get in the first place. And then they go through name after name after name and can't get the right name. We're going to give you some pretty good names. On our level down here, we love Colgate, Matt Langle. We love some of the other young coaches that are down at this level. But you'll see they have a very difficult time making that leap up. Like, why wouldn't Northwestern or some school like that hire Langle? Other schools have offered him, little jobs that are kind of in the middle there. But everything he's done on that standard has been really, really good. So you have to kind of look at that and say, does the big time really consider themselves that much different than everybody else? But this is going to start to heat up really, really quickly, and we're going to keep you in tune on it. We're also going to keep you in tune on when we look at the DePaul job, when we look at now the Ohio State job. We'll get you some names next week for who we think might be able to fill those once they're open. Once they open, we'll let you know. All right, Pete, again, what a great banquet that was today. What a great meal that was. I was surprised I made it through without going into a food coma. But that was special. So we'll be back next week, rocking and rolling, and we'll be having another top 25 and another Super 15 for you. Stay well. Be in the zone.